look at that gigantic tree. Look.
That is a really big tree. That's why I'm filming it, yeah. Look at that big tree.
Morning, Scott.
Good morning, kind sir.
Woo, doggy. You got a morning for us, huh? May 27th, 4:30. What T minus 57 minutes before Chris Howard show. Oh, all right. Hey, I got so today I actually was thinking about it. I got kind of two things. One I'm gonna drop is super heavy, and then the other is super light. And in fact, some might say it would be like having our heads in the clouds. Oh. But if at any point you actually want to have a good conversation, you could totally do that.
Okay. No, I'm going to follow your lead today.
Morning. Morning, Goldsby. All right. So the first thing I kind of wanted to drop was this thing that's been kind of heavy on my heart for a long time, and especially in thinking about the church and the Christian church. Good morning, Brett. And then, and part of impetus in thinking about this is our conversations, and sometimes we get into husbandy father talk, and that it's good and true, the husband father talk, and because God uses it as an analogous relational situation in which we could understand how he relates to us. So, both as a husband and as a father. So those can be good. And then, but anyways, I had a message in a text thread. What kind of precipitated this was a message in a text thread from a friend, and some other people had a husband father question that they were asking some of the guys, and then one of the guys replied, "Hey, we're suffering. My wife and I aren't able to have children. And they're an older couple. They've said they've never been able to have children, and my wife and I, that's part of our story, is that we are not able to have natural born children, and purely by God's grace have we been able to grow our family by having our son through adoption, and we didn't even know if that was going to be possible when my wife first had her medical situation, and we didn't know if we would be medically approved to qualify to be able to be adoptive parents. And then once we were, and that hurdle was passed, there were a lot of other hurdles. to adoption, way more than there should be. And financially, it's ridiculous. And again, only by God's grace. We did not have the funds ourselves. A large cloud of witnesses gathered around us and helped fund us, and then just like the paperwork and all those things. And we had a unique situation because we were living overseas at the time, and so all of the indicators were like we would be in a situation where we would not have children. So um, I have a couple of writings on that, and but in the spirit of Ethan Kahi, um, I have something I wrote a while back, and it's not really directly related to this. Actually, I have more writings. I almost started a website like 10, 15 years ago called, um, yeah, Brett has a good point real quick. That's a good, right? The adoption is also a narrative of how God relates to us. And so relationally, it's a great one too. And definitely want to take that's more food for fodder on another live stream on another morning. That's a super good one. I have a whole thing, sermon kind of thing I've done on that one. That's good. But today I wanted to focus on both kind of two aspects of how the Christian church in a lot of ways, and I don't know the deep history of this, but from a Protestant perspective, right, we had things like focus on the family, and right, which was supposed to be, Christ focused, but the name was focus on the family, and um, and just the natural reversion is this is the mean, um, for men to become a husband and to become a father. And those are both great things, and I'm not arguing against those. But I think our theology needs to be broader, and I think our inclusivity needs to be larger to include those who are never going to be fathers, who are never going to be husbands. And then also on the other side of the gender sex divide, those who will never be wives and those who will never be mothers, because and I think that's even a harder thing for them. And I think there is a little more support, and it's only by abysmally little, for females and being able to process that and find a place in the church than for males. It is extremely hard for males to just in general to find a place in the church, and then say you're a single male and you want to work with the youth, you want to dedicate some time to working with teenagers and pouring in them, like personal experience. Once you get past like your mid 20s, people will kind of look at you and be like, why are you still single, and what's going on with you, like they kind of give you a side eye. And if you're around a community and long enough, you'll have enough people kind of be able to speak into that, and be like, no, he's fine, he's a good, he's a good guy, we vouch for him. But at the same time, like that's just kind of crazy, that we as a church, with a huge, I feel like that's a huge area that we could grow, right? Growth mindset, right? Not that and then not that all churches are poor on this or have that. I just think it's from my experience. Let's talking from my experience. All right, enough of my talky talk. Back to what I was going to read. So I
Do you
call
mind
it.
if I add a little something?
Sure, yeah, add a lot something.
So I think it's really good you're doing this, because I too agree with the focus on the family sort of viewpoints that we have around here, for all those same reasons. I would just say that for the longest time, I thought that God's path for me was to be single. And that's kind of how I Christ's example was he didn't wed. He didn't become a father, right? And so there was a passage in the Bible that I was told as a young man that if you don't understand it, you shouldn't be a husband or a father. So just my little take on this, and thank you for doing it.
Yeah, my pleasure. And yeah, like I said, I actually have more. This, yeah. So, three. So I call this three wants and two acts. I just came up with that name last night because I had never titled it. A little boy raised his fist and it quivered with. A little boy raised his fist and it quivered with barely pent up anger. Through a strained neck, he shouts, "This is not what I wanted." The man gripped his desk, his fingertips white with strain and tension. Through gritted teeth, he growls, "This is not what I wanted." The old man lay in bed with tubes coming out, feebly clenching the blankets that lay over him with wrinkled and gaunt hands. Through a feeding tube and parched lips, he whispers, "That's not what I wanted." Act two. Little boy's arms squeeze the grandma's legs with all their might. Through a giant toothy grin, sans one front tooth, he shouts, "Thank you, Grandma. This is what I always wanted." The man's arms draped firmly but contentedly over the bare shoulder of his new bride. Through a contented half smile, his love-filled gaze said, "This is what I always wanted." The grandfather's arms energetically clapped back and forth in unbridled joy and adoration. Through a tearful smile, he beamed with pride and love. "This is what I always wanted." And I read this one in light of what I just was talking about because of the ones where it said, "This is what I've always wanted." Right? The two last were in relation, one to being a husband and two to being a father. Well, and then because then he was a grandfather. And if our society, and if in our society, these are some of the greatest things for a man to experience. And yet, on the reverse side, two of the things that men are most afraid of: failure and work and being alone, and loneliness. Right. The first two are endemic of a theology that has not embraced single men and fatherless men, or men who are not fathers. And the second denotes a theology that what's greatest in a man's life only comes from those things. So I just wanted to interject this conversation into the thoughts of the TLC. Got Brett coming on. Morning, Brett.
Morning.
Morning, Scott.
Do you know
Good.
Do you know the verse I was referring to?
I don't know. You want me to look it up?
Maybe. Yeah. We should do that. I can't remember the words even, but it was for me, it was pretty amazing that I had an understanding of it after I became a father, but I desperately because I always wanted a family from a very young age. I wanted to be a father in some ways to prove that I could do it and do it well, which is obviously the wrong reasons to do it, right? Like pride. But then after I became, it was pretty amazing too how I could finally understand that verse. I don't even know how to even look it up.
Was it when Paul is talking to men, women, and children and giving them their duties? Is that what that is?
It could be. I don't know for sure though. It's been a long time since I've looked into it. I looked into it a lot as a young man before I became a husband and a father. But I can't remember what it is now.
Yeah, I remember back in my youths, I took a road trip. I had a little Toyota pickup, and I had put on a camper shell, and I converted it into a place where I could sleep and live. took a road trip, and just all by myself up the Pacific coast of California into Oregon and Washington, and even a little bit into Canada. And on that trip, there was like a dark and stormy night, literally, and I just like realization, like I could die out here, and it was interesting because God used this in that quietness and in that trip that helped me come to the realization that I will die, right? And it's like you will cease to breathe, and it could be in this evening a branch could fall and land on this truck, and no one would know. A canister could open, and you could asphyxiate. That's a real thing with stealth camping that people have to be aware of. And I was just like confronted face to face, and I was kind of like, God, I don't want to die, because there's still things I want to do. There's still things I want to do on this earth. And I was just kind of open and honest, like with him, because as a Protestant, you'd been led to believe like you should want to go to heaven. You should want to encounter God, and he's the greatest thing. And I was like, nope, that's not the greatest thing I want right now. And so I was just like, man, I was able to be honest with him, and that was part of it, right? Being a father. I wanted to be a husband and a father, and that was one of those things. And many years later, he took me on a journey where that was a very real possibility that A, I wasn't going to be husband, or B, I wasn't going to be a father. And neither of those happened till later. And so I had a while to process that. And so that's where my heart towards that comes from. And I always want to be aware. One of my best friends, even to now, is a unmarried man, and he is in contact with me all like multiple times a week, and he still prays with me once a week. And he's just an incredible man of faith and of prayer, and God has used his life in incredible and amazing ways that would not have been possible if he was a husband and a father. And I just really want to see that option explored and developed more for both men and women. On that, sorry, I'm talking too much. Brett,
Not at all.
Scott,
not at all. You're cooking. Because that's the thing about being a husband and a father, is that you're kind of forced to be of two minds, right? Because you have to put food on the table, because you've been given stewardship over these lives, And so it makes it much more difficult to wouldn't say be in, but I think you hit on it perfectly. When you're not committed to those other souls, right? You're able to fully be committed to the work of the Lord, right? And I too had a similar kind of conversation with that, and I knew that's what my feeling was that that's what God had planned for me, was to be a monastery type figure in the modern world, where you're fully committed to Him. And that's one reason why I say some of my greatest sins have turned into my greatest joys, is because I actively worked against that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think I wrestle because right, some of your greatest sins have turned into some of your greatest joys. How could we come up with words and hopes and expectations for those whose greatest sins don't become, quote, their greatest joys? How do we develop other modes of understanding greatest joy? Right, because that's what, like in my poem, right, is the adult man, his two greatest joys were being a new husband and being a father or grandfather. How would I change that poem to include those who don't have that opportunity?
I wonder if there's a saint that embodies kind of that, because I don't know.
I mean, Jesus didn't have either of those, like.
Fair, but we're always falling short of that example. Right? Yeah.
Because I think there is. I think there is. Right? It's like another little revolution I'm trying is to celebrate baptisms more within the Protestant church. Right? Because that should be one of the greatest joys. At our church, they call people up to celebrate their birthdays, and they pray over them for their birthdays. And then they call people up for anniversaries. And in my head, I'm like, well, what about all those people in your congregation that will have birthdays, but we'll never have the anniversary? Like, it's okay celebrating anniversaries, but why don't we have something else for those people other than just being alive, And
yeah, that's nice.
Should we be is baptism and celebrating their baptism something we could do? Is celebrating faithfulness in certain ministries something we could be doing?
What's the point of the celebration though? What's the idea behind it?
I think one, for the birthdays, just getting people up and they pray for them. They have like a set liturgical prayer that they pray for them, and then the anniversaries I think is the same thing. And so I think it's just probably, I don't know the history of the church, because I'm just brand new there. But I'm assuming somebody along the lines like, hey, let's invite people up to celebrate their birthdays, and then someone at some point, somebody's like, hey, these people are having a 50th anniversary. Let's call them up and pray over them and celebrate them, and it probably just kind of continued from there. but so I don't know.
So it's a way to fold in the single person
Mm-hmm.
into the celebration.
I got news for you.
Mm.
I don't think I'd want that kind of attention.
Fair enough. That's true too. That's true. Yeah. Yeah, and that is yeah.
So I like probably, I would say, with the exception of the younger generation, to not label them with a label, um, and not even, I guess, clarify the sex. I mean, I guess you could say one sex is more like this than the other. Maybe not. I don't know. But I definitely had a longing for a long period of time, probably an unhealthy longing, to be in a relationship, get married, have kids, um, for a variety of reasons. Probably the first was since I had more of a thought provoking, some would say maybe even emotional bent to the idea of it. Um, Probably so that, I found my unit, right? Um, Especially when my brother got married and he had kids. You'd feel it even harder. But it's kind of like I think back to when Jesus is here and he's walking the planet. Family was of the utmost importance. You know, you did have your units um, that clearly took a hierarchy position in people's lives. Um, I would say probably even more than I can't get into the psyche of the ancient church or the ancient Jewish man for the temple and what it meant. Obviously, it meant a lot. It's not that it didn't, but family definitely, because it's like the regular life doings. It's kind of like how we look at careers, right? Our job can become the biggest thing sometimes because it's what we do all the time. Um, so I think back to that verse when he would say, and it's evolved how I thought about it over the years, where his mom and his brothers were coming to get him. And they're like, hey, your mom and your brothers are outside trying to take you out of here. And he's like, who are my mothers and brothers? And he looks around at his disciples and everybody there and he says, these are my brothers and mothers. I mean, it's like flipping everything upside down, right? Like he always does, the perspective and calling to them the more important things is, like that that personal relationship with the creator of the universe and growing in knowledge about him and with him. Now, the families were going to be able to utilize that in their families, right? It's not like he's saying disregard your family. But he's trying to, it seems he's trying to explain the hierarchy here and what's priority, what's important, what should be important. And it's ironic because it just trickles down from there, like I said, with the benefits. So like for me, when I was listening, of course, when I would listen to Paul talk about married and not married, and of course, I fell into the hovering over the don't burn in sin thing. I'm like, yeah, I got to get married, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but I also in recovery ministries, and I had the opportunity to lead a lot of different groups, and some of the groups I got to lead were the sexual addiction groups, and hearing how some men were very similar to women, where they were addicted to love, which was so fascinating to me. I just never really had thought things like that before. To me, and because most men seem to be physically oriented, to be addicted to this abstract thing, or emotion driven, was kind of bizarre to me, just because I didn't understand it. I understood the female angle of it, and I understood that, that could be a difficult situation. Like, I understood that. But then I started like doing my own self-evaluation. And so that's kind of what hit me, yeah, I guess I was probably, the desire for the love, the emotional part, was definitely more important than the physical part, or what I was dying for. And for me, my brick wall event when I was 25 was a curse and a blessing, right? It was a thing that stopped me acting like a complete idiot in my tracks. And, I grew up. And by growing up, I thought part of growing up was going to be ultimately having a family, but it didn't. I tried a couple of times, got engaged, things like that. But the idea of being married, being the antithesis of the you figured it out, you found life, you found joy, that sort of thing, the kids, all that, was misplaced in the hierarchy. It's like I still wasn't in the right relationship with Christ yet. And then once I got there, it was like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Would it have been great if I got to see what that other path would have looked like? Maybe. But I also know I'm a sinful man, I have no idea what that would have looked like. I don't know how good or bad of a father I would have been. I don't know how good or bad of a husband I would have been. It doesn't matter because I'm not, so it's not like it doesn't do any good dwelling on whether I would have been good or would have been bad. But I definitely was able to find such gratitude in my chaos and him bringing me out of it, and being able to look back and have that perspective of how I was versus how he made me now. And so it's a joy for me to be able to have the freedom I have. It's like Paul talks about for the single guy, right? I don't have a divided allegiance. I don't have, but I mean, obviously I don't have certain things, right? The joy stuff that fathers and husbands have, or mothers and daughters have, or mothers and wives have. But my joy is a different type of joy. And so to be singled out, right, as if this is an issue, again, not saying that the culture doesn't have an issue with the fact that younger people are starting from the place of I don't want to be married type thing. That's a different issue, but at least for me in my generation, that wasn't the case, right? And some of it probably had to do with, I don't know. I think he made me uniquely special in that way, just like he made you guys uniquely special. And the way that he's changed you through your children and through your family, right? And so like we have these unique formations that are just awesome. And the way he uses all of us in the body of Christ. We're talking about the church. We're talking about the invisible church, the church we can't see across all denominations. And yeah, I think he's just amazing. It's just amazing to see how he uses it all. He uses the cynic. He uses it all, whether you like it or not. So
Yeah,
sorry. I hope I didn't monologue there. I did probably.
that was great. That was great. Most of it was telling your story, and that's always great. Um, and yeah, I guess kind of what go along. It is interesting. Sorry, I started like four thoughts there. I'll get to one. You pointed out that this coming generation actually is having a harder time and thinking of marriage, especially they say, the statistics, whoever they are who compose those statistics, they're saying like, especially with females, a lot of them aren't wanting to get married, and that's looking harder uh, for them. And so that's an interesting place to be coming from. How like our generation, we were like, hey, this is the thing to do, and then their generation, they're like, no, don't do that. That's dumb. And so I guess maybe even more now with the coming generation who are deciding to take a different path than our generation was directed towards. Um, it's a better thing to have that conversation, because like you were saying, it's you get, I think what you said in terms of you have different joys, you have different um, blessings of being able to be whole minded, dedicated to that relationship, to that vertical relationship with God that that you have, and so it's at the same time you don't get to experience other ones, just like we as fathers and husbands aren't able to experience all the joys that you get to experience. And I think that's kind of my hope and heart behind it, is just like normalizing the joys of both, right? God uses both, and I feel like sometimes, at least in our generation, that wasn't always presented that way. um,
Well, yeah, I'm thinking about the monasteries. Like, isn't that the whole idea behind the celibacy, behind the 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 leaders in the church, is that they were supposed to be married to God, right? And how that allows you to be more in one with Him. So I don't. And for some reason, Ezra's last movie is popping into my head with the glasses and the reproduce kind of billboard that came up there. Get married and reproduce. I wonder. I'm wondering, how much the culture has kind of pendulum swung back and then away. But I'd also like to add to the conversation a little bit. Marriage is one thing, but then having kids is another. I've seen a lot of, just in my anecdotal relationships with young people. They don't want to bring kids into the world. They think the world is so, and this is a very general statement, so I don't want to say everybody's like that, but that seems to be one of the prominent viewpoints with a lot of the young people that I've worked with and engaged with, is that they think the world is just so messed up that bringing children into this world is selfish and cruel. And so even if marriage, was the one thing, then bringing kids, and then we have the options to not do that, right? But
We think we do.
Yeah. The urban legend is I was born on birth control and condoms, so or I was conceived on birth control and condoms. So yeah, no, that's funny. Not funny like funny, but you know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Ironic funny.
yeah.
We know your humor.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks, Olson.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Have a good day at work, Scott.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. He's leaving. So he's leaving. I'm going to add this to the stage just so we have something beautiful to look at. There you go. Right. That was, if no one came on and wanted to talk about this, I was going to practice drawing clouds.
Your head in the clouds.
Get my head in the clouds. I was like, if no one wanted to talk about it, I was like, because it's a heavy, it's not an easy topic. So I didn't know if people were, it'd be interested. So I was like, well, if they're not, I'll do something else, But yeah, so yeah, the idea of what Scott was saying. There's that passage in, I think it's Isaiah, but sometimes I get it wrong. I try to look for it, probably at least once a month or once every 2 months, and talks about the eunuchs will be given a greater inheritance than even those who had children, right? And then it says those, and right before that, it says those the barren shall bear more children, and this is within the coming, the redeemed.
Yeah, because you think about an older woman in the church, whether she had children or now she's at the age where everyone's moved on or they're older, whatever. The level of love that they're able to give the children in the church, it's like they have tons of children. So, like under that framework, it's really special, and it's obviously easier for her to do that now. Obviously, I'm like you, I'm probably like people that viewed it the way you were describing. If you're not married with kids and you're wanting to kick it around the kids, I mean, I don't know. It is a bizarre thing. Now, whether or not, I mean, could there be a small percentage of those that it isn't a weird thing? Probably, but I think that we're right to have our antennas up about that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think just the way around this is to celebrate everybody. Just it doesn't matter whether you're married or not, and that was always my gripe. Like I had lots of gripes when I came back into a church that was loving and accepting me, wanting me to be part of it, but yet they had so many family groups, so many, cliques and stuff. And, and it's like always seemed to be difficult to fire up they want to call it a singles ministry or whatever. So I'm like, to me, I was like, I don't care whether you're young or not, or, it's not, you call it a singles ministry, all of a sudden it turns into a dating scene. And so like one of the guys, the older couple in our denomination, in my church, started young at heart. And that was cool because it's a bunch of people that don't have kids, or I'm sure that some of them have maybe have lost kids, type thing, whatever, where they're looking for a community within the community to do things with. And because that can be a very lonely place at times for even couples that don't
Yeah.
have kids.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
And that's not cool. So I think that the idea of having groups now, unfortunately, with having groups and just being loving everyone and trying to not necessarily segregate groups or having groups around family stuff, there's no way you're going to stop a father from talking about his kids or a mother from talking about her kids. And as a single person that's kind of leveled out in my emotional understanding, I don't really want them to stop talking about them. You know what I mean? Like I'm okay. I'm not bitter about that.
Mhm.
Now there are probably some single people where it is triggering for them to listen to that type of talk. But I think it's glorious that they have what they have, and the lessons I have learned. This is probably my biggest gripe. If I were to pick a gripe that I still probably hold on to, is that married men or men with kids, and probably holds true with women, they think that they have some sort of secret knowledge and understanding of life that's beyond what a single person can ever comprehend. And I don't think that's right. I'm not saying right meaning justice right. I'm saying I don't think it's accurate.
Mhm.
I think that a single person can understand the values of all those things without having them.
Mhm.
And I think that the idea that you have to parse it out and say, well, if you had kids, you'd understand type thing. It's like, okay, there are single people that don't understand without a doubt.
Mhm.
But there's also single people that are quite intuitive on what
Mhm.
that means, the responsibilities that would go with that, um, all that stuff, you know? So um, the problem is, it's like loving our neighbor, like the idea of not having the wherewithal to understand that what you're saying carries harm to people that you're talking to. I struggle with this all the time. Like, am what I about to say going to hurt somebody? I don't want that, but I'm also not trying to not talk into the problem either. I'm just saying I can do it with love. You know, like
Mhm.
I know parents that when they're talking with me, they're very kind and considerate with the way they discuss their family with me. They're not, you know, you know what I mean, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. I think is we went through the process of not being able to have children. Um, I know it was a lot harder for my wife than for myself in that process. Like you were saying, those conversations, oh, you'll understand. Um, then, once you're a parent, you'll understand, or, you don't understand because, and, um,
Devaluing, right?
yeah, yeah, devaluing, and I didn't take as much. And it was kind of interesting because I had good friends who understood our situation, um, and at that time of life, a lot of the couples are having children and becoming pregnant and stuff, and sometimes with their first, and people we saw get married way after us, and they were, having children and stuff. And to me, like you were saying, right, like I see what you have and I value it. That's a treasure, and so I would tell them, like, don't be afraid to talk to me about that. Right. And I, from a different perspective, value and treasure what you have probably even more than you necessarily realize or value that treasure, you know? Like, and so I'm happy for you because I understand that in a way that you probably won't be able to understand. And so it's like I'm super excited for you. Like this is great. Like
Like one of my pastors says, like, just had their fourth kid, So he's an infant, and of course the rest of them are young, and they're going crazy at one of our psalm services, and she's wrangling them and everything. And I'm just smiling. I'm looking over at her, and I'm like, "What a blessing!" And
Mhm.
she just looks at me and smiles, and she says, "Thank you very much." Like, so we were both in this place where we both were healthy about the perspective. She
Mhm.
knew that this was difficult for her, and what she was trying to do is a difficult situation, and you can get lost in that. But she also knew that there's other people that are like, oh, I could never have so many kids, or mothers that would be like, oh, I've got so many kids and this is overwhelming, or, and most people usually do approach her that way, she said. But to have somebody just come up and just be like, especially in a chaotic moment,
Mhm.
to remind her of the blessing and what everything is going on at that very moment.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think our old pastor, um, from where we just moved from, um, would try to do this, like on Mother's Day and on Father's Days. He would he would look around and he would say, if you're an adult woman, this holiday is for you, because as a church, we want you to look around and see these other children and say, I can be a mother figure is loosely termed, but like a female adult figure that they could look up to, they could turn to if there is a time of need. That that if they're out playing in the garden and they scrape their leg, right? You could be a person to pick them up and to help them and to provide that welcoming environment, the feminine environment. And then for the males on Father's Day, he's like, we want all the males to be participating in
Figures.
in
Yeah.
in the growth and development of our children and being
That's how
male
we do
figures.
that's how we do baptism. It's a two-part thing where they ask the parents, are you committed to raising this child in a Christian family, this, that, and the other thing. And then they turn to the congregation and ask the congregation, what, and giving their responsibility to, and that's for everyone in the congregation, and it's sobering when you think about how all of your behavior. Now we're we're focusing in on just the church, but this holds true out in life, right? Like I'll be at the job and I have some young people there, and I remember when a tragedy came in the news, and I was like on my phone, and I'm like, oh, this is horrible, and here I am, like talking with them about it, and we're looking at social media, and I'm thinking to myself, the next day I went there and I go, I'm gonna tell you, I'm sorry about all that. They're like, what are you talking about? Like they're clueless. I'm like, nah, I I should have been I should have had a different framework instead of getting sucked into what was going on in the world, to be a better example as to why this isn't as big of a deal. Like I got sucked down the rabbit hole.
Mhm.
Um and just acting like somebody that, you know, that acting like a whatever, how triggering this is for people, but that acting like a good Christian, somebody that, yeah, they have a good framework and they understand this, and it makes sense. And I wouldn't have thought about it that way. Instead, I was just like another guy, freaking out about something that was going on.
Mhm.
So inside, outside the church, they're all watching, they're all getting their cues. you know
Mhm. Yeah, I love that you pointed to that part of baptism. I had never growing up, that hadn't been a part of our tradition, and then going to a higher church, a more liturgical church, that was part of their baptism as well. And I always thought that was great, and we should incorporate more of that. Like that, like highlight that more. Like really, come along. I know in Catholic circles they have godfathers and godmothers, and they don't have to be necessarily um, married. And I think that's a good and interesting practice.
Yeah, my godparents, um, since was raised and baptized in a Lutheran tradition, my godparents weren't related, and uh, they didn't do very, like individually, their marriages didn't do well. Things, happened, but they also weren't an integral part of my life the way some communities are, where that is a big deal. So, my godparents, you know, were a lot of the members in the church, certain diamonds in the rough that spoke into my life, you know, showed care, and interest in me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in Protestant circles you'll see it more in like the you know, youth leaders and people who are helping out with youth groups and things like that. That's kind of where that responsibility gets pigeonholed. But I feel like it should be I think it should be broader and should be opened up on that.
I
So
do think there's a value, though, to the youth leaders being closer in age to the youth. Um, the man that's over the youth group in my church is an older guy, a father that's raised kids, and then he has a bunch of younger people, young adults under him
mhm,
that can keep up with them, right?
mhm,
Even though he does a pretty good job keeping up with them himself. But so when a call to the youth group ministry happened, you could see all these eclectic different personalities on stage that were going to be speaking into their kids' lives. They were going to be active you know what I mean? And they
mhm,
make it a diligent effort to have one of these young adults for every, at least, I forget what it is. It's like at least 10 kids, you
mhm,
know, which is hard to do in some churches, to have that many people that are willing to be part of the church,
mhm.
and serve like that. So
Yeah, yeah, that's a good model. That's something that as churches we should absolutely 100% be looking to do is like for Grim likes to say, in my interview with him he talked about was in terms of paintball for Jesus, like you have you know he's he, we could go out and have a party and sex, drugs, and rock and roll. What does the church have to offer me? And so part of that's true, and there are Christian groups like Young Life that are trying to do that, in certain youth groups, trying not sex, drugs, rock and roll, but alternative activities that are very
yeah, but
active
you know
and
what? You know where
engaging.
the missing link was, and I think you and Ethan can probably both relate to this, is that Young Life and all of the mega youth group ministries, a lot fell through the cracks.
Hmm.
There just wasn't enough mentorship. There wasn't enough any of that. And
Yeah.
um, so yeah, you know, this is probably more an indictment to mega churches than is meant. It's just that if it's not orientated properly and you don't have enough people that are serving and trying to take up the mantle in a lot of these roles, it's like that's what's going to happen, right?
Right. You're right. Yeah, 100%. That's what I was. Yeah, and that's what I'm. Yeah. So as the church, what we should be able to offer is exactly what you were saying, right? We should be able to offer them a father figure, a mother figure. We should be able to offer them a family and a place to belong, because so many of the youth do not have that, and we should unequivocally be able to offer that to them as a community. All right, it's that time. Any final thoughts?
Oh, sure.
Thank you, Brett. Yeah, great. Thank you for getting on and sharing. That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.